He stole their fortune. He shattered their home. But he left 2 children behind, and they remembered everything. My name is Caleb Whitmore. I was 10 when I watched my father's name burn across headlines. 12 when my mother died stocking shelves just to feed us. 15 when I stopped believing in happy endings. But I never forgot. Not the way he shook my father's hand while stabbing him in the back. Not the way he walked out clean while we were left in ashes. They called it a tragedy. We called it an origin story. Because justice doesn't always wear a badge. Sometimes, it grows up in the dark. And waits. The day my childhood ended didn't come with thunder or war. It came with a phone call and the sound of a wine glass shattering against a tile floor. My mother, Lisa, was slicing apples for Emily's lunchbox. I was trying to tie my shoelaces faster than my dad could tie his tie. A silly game we played before school. When the phone rang, Mom answered with her usual calm tone. But within seconds, her fingers slackened. The glass slipped, hit the ground, and splintered like the life we were about to lose. That was the morning the SEC raided Whitmore Investments. My father, Michael Whitmore, wasn't just another CEO in a penthouse office. He was the Michael Whitmore, a man who believed in ethics in a world that believed in quarterly returns. He started his firm out of a rented office in Soho with 3 employees and a code. No lies, no shortcuts, no ghosts in the books. Wall Street mocked him for it. Clients worshipped him for it. But ethics couldn't save him from betrayal. I remember sitting on the marble floor of our apartment, trying to make sense of the static coming from the TV. SEC raids Whitmore Investments in Manhattan. CEO Michael Whitmore unavailable for comment. Allegations of insider trading, accounting fraud. I didn't even know what those words meant. But I saw my dad on the screen. And I saw the tears roll down my mom's cheeks. It was Derek Slade. He was everything my father believed in grooming. Smart, confident, Ivy League charm without the arrogance, or so it seemed. My dad called him the future, said he reminded him of himself only hungrier. But hunger becomes greed when fed unchecked. Derek siphoned funds through shell firms and sold trade secrets to competitors. Then he tipped off the SEC himself to cover his tracks and secure his golden parachute. Like a villain in a corporate thriller, only this was our life. That night, Dad sat at his desk until 3 a.m. The light under his office door never went out. I remember peeking in once. He was holding a photo of us, the 4 of us on the carousel in Central Park. I'd never seen him look so lost, like the weight of an empire had just fallen through his hands. He hugged us harder than usual that morning, kissed Mom longer, told us he loved us like it was the last thing he ever wanted to say. It was, they say a man's worth is measured by what he builds. My dad built trust with clients, with his partners, with us. And it was all torn down in less than a week. Whitmore Investments dissolved under a storm of subpoenas, lawsuits, and media vultures. Clients left in droves. Partners turned silent. The building that bore his name was stripped of it overnight. And Derek? He walked away untouched. Richer, shinier, with a new venture already underway. Slade Capital. Backed by shadow investors and lubricated by the very poison that brought my father down. He got his own profile in Forbes, a rising star. They called him visionary. I was 10, but even I knew what that word really meant. Liar with good PR. My dad spent the last 2 weeks of his life fighting to clear his name. Courtroom to newsroom, press conference after press conference. He wore the same navy suit like a uniform. I watched him age in those 2 weeks. He stopped eating, started shaking. Once I heard him throw up after an interview. Then came the hearing. It was a gray morning. Light rain slicked the courthouse steps. Reporters lined the pavement. I held my mother's hand so tight she winced. My father walked up the steps like a soldier. But halfway there he stopped. He turned around, looked at us, and collapsed. They said it was a massive heart attack. No warning, no chance. I remember my mom screaming. I remember Emily clinging to my arm. I remember the world going silent. Michael Whitmore died on the steps of a courthouse, accused of crimes he didn't commit, crimes orchestrated by the man he trusted most. My mother was a lioness in pearls. She'd hosted galas for cancer research, raised millions for shelters, supported my dad's firm with relentless dignity. But when the walls caved in, no one remembered her generosity. We were broke. Not just financially, but spiritually. Friends stopped calling. Neighbors avoided eye contact. The city turned cold. She sold everything, jewelry, paintings, even the Steinway she inherited from her grandmother. We moved to Queens, then to a shelter, then to another. She took 3 jobs, daycare, waitressing, janitorial shifts in schools where no one knew her name. She'd come home past midnight, her hands raw, her face pale. And still, she'd kiss our foreheads and say, "Just a little longer, my loves. We're almost there." We weren't. One afternoon in a discount supermarket, she collapsed in the stockroom. Brain aneurysm.
Instant.
Unfair. Final. I was 13. Emily was 10. And just like that, we were orphans. The state said they were doing what was best. They split us up. Emily was sent west, to a tech-savvy foster family in Utah. I was sent north to a couple in Albany who thought emotional distance was the same as discipline. We wrote letters. Every week. On paper. No email.
No texts.
Just ink and longing. We kept the past alive in cursive. And at the end of every letter we wrote, "We remember. We rebuild." Emily kept Dad's cufflinks. I kept a voicemail, Mom singing, "You are my sunshine," while folding laundry. That 30-second clip was my lullaby, my war cry, my inheritance. Foster care was a slow erosion of identity. But I learned. I read the Wall Street Journal at 12, memorized names, followed markets, taught myself how finance really worked. I stopped trusting faces. I started reading patterns. And Emily? She became a ghost in the machine, taught herself code, hacked her first firewall at 12, designed her own software by 14. She wasn't just smart. She was invisible, untraceable. The world thought we were gone, but we were just getting started. Foster care was not a chapter in our lives. It was a battlefield, silent, bureaucratic, and slow. I landed with the Trumbolls in upstate New York. Ex-military, devout, and rigid. Rules were more important than warmth. They believed pain built character. I learned to keep my emotions wrapped tight, like stocks in a bear market. Every Sunday, I wrote to Emily. She always replied by Wednesday. Her handwriting changed as she got older. Sharper, quicker, like code written in ink. We shared everything through those letters. Our fears, our strategies, our grief. And always, we remember, we rebuild. I kept them in a shoebox under my bed, blue envelopes that smelled like printer ink and hope. Emily's letters weren't just notes. They were lifelines. And in return, I sent her the only thing I had to offer. Tactics. Financial playbooks I wrote in the margins of homework. News clippings with underlined phrases. Fake company balance sheets that I treated like puzzles. It was our code, a brother and sister building their own Wall Street from fragments. By 16, I had a fake Bloomberg terminal running on an old laptop. By 17, I was trading microcap stocks under a ghost account through a friend's cousin. I made enough for textbooks. Emily made enough designing custom encryption tools for data brokers. We never said the word revenge. Not once. But it sat there between every line of every letter. Because we didn't want revenge. We wanted justice. Public.
Permanent.
And poetic. Emily was raised by machines. Her foster home in Salt Lake City was led by a single mom. A robotics engineer who kept spare servo motors in the living room and ran Linux like a religion. It was the luckiest unlucky break any orphan could ask for. By 12, Emily was debugging kernel scripts. By 13, she'd reverse-engineered the firmware on the foster home surveillance cameras, so the system always recorded loops from 2 days prior. Privacy hacked into existence. She never stopped writing me. But her letters became digital. Encrypted .txt files buried in cloud storage, accessible only through a series of proxies and password fragments she taught me to assemble from memory. It was like playing spy with the world, except we were training for a war. She called herself Echo. Because that's what she felt like. The last sound of a family destroyed. And eventually, that's who she became online. Echo was a name that would make the right people shiver. By 14, she was taking contract jobs, anonymized, of course, building firewall software and writing predictive trade bots for greedy hedge funds who didn't care how the sausage was made as long as it worked. They didn't know that behind every algorithm, she left a ghost key. A way back in. A seed of control. That's how we started building our future, by hiding inside theirs. I turned 18 in November. It was raining that day, not in storms, but in mist. That soft kind of cold that wraps around your bones and tells you the world doesn't owe you warmth. Emily got on a Greyhound and traveled across 3 states with just a backpack and a laptop. We met at the edge of Central Park. It had been 5 years. She was taller. Her hair was shorter. And her eyes, they were still my sister's but sharper now. Like she'd seen too many screens and too few sunrises. She held out her fist. I bumped it with mine. And she whispered, "We remember." I said, "We rebuild." We stayed in a friend's cousin's spare room in Queens. Mold on the ceiling, cockroaches on the floor. But it was ours. Our bunker. Our launch pad. We didn't talk much that first night. We just sat on the floor, surrounded by maps, laptops, newspapers, and the only photograph of our parents we still had. Dad at a podium, Mom in the front row, her eyes proud and fierce. It wasn't a vow of vengeance. It was something bigger. We will not let our story end in silence. For the next 3 years, we disappeared from the world and began building one of our own. I became CJ Walker, a name built from initials that meant nothing to anyone but me. A composite identity built from borrowed records, dark web forgeries, and careful credit building. I enrolled in a trade finance certification program under an assumed identity. Graduated top of my class. Interned at 2 hedge funds. Learned from the inside how the monster thinks. Emily deepened her code. She studied neural networks, quantum encryption, and behavior prediction models. By 19, she could write an AI that could outtrade an entire floor of analysts. We didn't just want to beat Derek. We wanted to build a sword from his own metal. We created Nova Equities, a sleek, anonymous, algorithm-based financial firm that offered silent, private consulting to elite hedge funds. Emily built the tech. I built the face. Together, we offered solutions that were 2 steps ahead of market predictions. Guess who came knocking? Derek Slade. Now a billionaire with private jets and TV interviews, he wanted a new edge. He'd built an empire on deception. Now he wanted certainty. We gave it to him. Or at least that's what he thought. Started small. We sold him predictive models that worked brilliantly at first. His returns spiked. His rivals noticed. Nova Equities became his secret weapon. He never met us in person. That was by design. We let him win again and again. Because trust is the sweetest poison when served slowly. Behind the curtain, Emily was installing kill switches in every algorithm. Subtle inconsistencies. Behavioral deviations that mimicked real-world randomness. No one would notice until the collapse was irreversible. And me? I took a job at a business magazine under a pseudonym. Financial journalism, Derek's Achilles heel. Publicity was his drug. I knew how to get under his skin. That's when I met her. Madeline Slade, Derek's daughter. Investigative journalist. Fierce. Brilliant. With a grudge against her father buried just beneath the surface. I didn't fall for her. Not in the way love songs talk about. But I understood her. She hated corruption. She hated silence. And she wanted to burn the system down. So I gave her the match. Slade Capital's headquarters sat like a throne of glass over Midtown. 42 floors of arrogance, deception, and polished marble. Its logo, a metallic phoenix, mocked everything it destroyed. My father built with honor. Derek built with shadows. Now I was walking into his kingdom, as one of his knights. He didn't know it was me. To him, I was CJ Walker, the quiet genius behind Nova Equities, the man whose algorithms made him richer than ever. I wore tailored suits and spoke in clipped, neutral tones. Never too much eye contact. Never too little. Enough mystery to intrigue. Enough results to be indispensable. Emily stayed in the dark behind layers of encrypted proxies and burner nodes. She monitored every server inside Slade Capital through a backdoor I'd installed inside a system update. One click and she could crash his entire empire before he even noticed the lights flicker. But that wasn't the plan. We weren't here to bring him down in one blow. We were here to let him destroy himself piece by piece from within. Derek liked to win. But more than that, he liked to be worshipped. He invited me to his Hamptons estate, poured 60-year-old scotch like it was water, introduced me to billionaires and senators, framed me as the future of Wall Street. It was the same script he used with my father. I played along. But every toast, every handshake, every sycophantic laugh, I was planting seeds. Emily fed me data. Emails, wire transfers, offshore ledgers, all of it stolen from his encrypted drives. Derek didn't just cheat the system. He built a private market within it, a web of insider trades, proxy takeovers, and shell companies that controlled entire industries in silence. And now we controlled that web. Quietly, we redirected flows. One of his subsidiaries suddenly faced a tax audit. Another was quietly bought out by a competitor we secretly backed. Lawsuits emerged in foreign courts. Algorithms began to fail. Not enough to trigger alarms. Just enough to make him nervous. Because power is fragile. And we knew the more tightly he gripped it, the faster it would slip through his fingers. The moment came sooner than expected. A whistleblower from one of Derek's European holdings leaked a report to the press. A minor leak, one Emily orchestrated, disguised through 3 languages and 5 digital hops. But Derek panicked. He ordered audits, fired loyal executives, blamed foreign governments. The board grew restless. Investors fled. Meanwhile, I kept smiling. He asked me to stabilize the ship. Run a back-channel diagnostic, he said. Tell me what I don't know. What he didn't know was that I had ridden the storm. That night, in the dark of my apartment, I pulled out my old shoebox of letters from Emily. The paper was yellowing, the ink fading. But the words remained. We remember. We rebuild. I typed one line of code into the Novacore. #swansong equals true. Emily knew what it meant. At exactly 3:17 p.m. on a Tuesday, Slade Capital's internal trading systems began to glitch. Not a crash. Not a hack. A mirror. Every false asset. Every leveraged bet. Every synthetic holding Derek had buried under years of manipulation surfaced at once. To the outside world, it looked like spontaneous corruption. Internal fraud. A digital hemorrhage. His net worth plummeted by $2.4 billion in 11 minutes. Stockholders sued. Regulators froze accounts. And on every financial news site across the globe, the same headline echoed like a drumbeat. Slade Capital implodes amid allegations of historic market fraud. I stood at the window of his office, watching the chaos unfold on the monitors. Derek burst in, shouting at interns, cursing systems, demanding someone do something. I looked him in the eyes. And for the first time in my life, I saw it. Fear. Not the fear of losing money. The fear of being seen. Derek was indicted within 2 weeks. He blamed foreign sabotage. Blamed bad actors. Blamed me CJ Walker, but couldn't prove a thing. I was already gone. Emily vanished from every network. Nova Equities deleted itself, line by line, leaving behind only broken links and echoes. Madeline Slade published the full expose. Documents, timelines, audio recordings. She called it the Empire of Smoke. It went viral. Derek's mugshot became a meme. His fortune seized. His empire reduced to ash. And my father's name cleared. Posthumously, quietly, but cleared. It wasn't justice in a courtroom. It was something deeper. A restoration. I visited their graves on a cold morning. Mom and Dad side by side. Just names and dates. No headlines. No scandals. I left a blue envelope between the stones. Inside was a letter. Not encrypted. Not strategic. Just this. We remember. We rebuild. And now, we rest. Emily stood beside me. Silent. Older. Still my sister. We didn't cry. We'd done that already. Instead, we walked away, not with vengeance, not with triumph, but with peace. Because when you take everything from a child, you teach them to build something unstoppable. After Derek fell, the world moved on. Fast. Markets adjusted. News cycles spun. A new scandal replaced his by the weekend. But beneath the noise, something subtle happened. People remembered the name Whitmore again. Investors posted old quotes from my father's speeches. Articles re-examined the fall of Whitmore investments, now with new context. One op-ed in The Atlantic asked, "Was Michael Whitmore the last honest man on Wall Street?" It wasn't justice. Not fully. But it was air returning to a name suffocated by lies. Still, we didn't come for applause. We came for the future. I met Emily in a diner outside Boston. She wore no makeup, carried no devices, just a plain notebook and the same old hoodie with the ink stain near the sleeve. "We have enough," I told her. She sipped her tea. "That's never what this was about." She opened the notebook. Inside were names, thousands of them. Individuals, families, small businesses, all of them ruined by Slade capital. People like us. I flipped through the pages in silence. "You want to give it back?" I said. "No," she whispered. "I want to build something better." We called it Ashenlight, a fund with no board, no shareholders, no ads. It lived quietly beneath the noise. A private algorithm written by Emily powered it. Not for profit, for balance. It detected corporate sabotage, insider fraud, monopolistic patterns, and rebalanced the field. Quietly. Precisely. Like a scalpel. Ashenlight never gave money directly. It simply adjusted the currents, anonymous tips to journalists, targeted liquidity to ethical competitors, subtle exposures to toxic portfolios. Justice without fingerprints. We weren't billionaires. That wasn't the goal. We were architects of the tide. Emily never returned to public life. She disappeared into back channels, surfacing only as ghost contributors in obscure research papers or whistleblower support networks. Me? I took a quieter path. Teaching finance at a community college under a different name. One of my students had lost her father in the 2008 collapse. She never knew how. I made sure she left class understanding exactly why and how to fight back. We never became legends. That's the point. Legends die. But systems live. And we became the quiet system behind the system, a shadow in service of light. Years later, I found an old letter I'd written but never mailed. It was to my father. I read it aloud at the cemetery, sitting on the cold stone bench between their graves. "You were right, Dad. Trust is the only currency that matters. You taught us that. And we turned it into something no one could steal. We built it from ash. And we never once looked back. There was no wind that day. Just silence. And for the first time, it felt full, not empty. Like they were listening. Like they knew. We remember. We rebuild. We inherit the fire." It began with a whisper, not from the world, but from within. A letter appeared on my desk at the community college where I taught ethics in finance. No return address. Just a single, pristine envelope with thick, expensive paper and a handwritten message in black ink. "How long before you become what you fought?" 8 words. But they split me open. I held the note as the lecture hall emptied behind me. Sunlight from tall windows painted long shadows on the floor. Leaves rustled on the wind outside, caught in a late autumn storm. Somewhere distant, a bell rang for the next class. But in my mind, I was back in Manhattan. Back in that courtroom. Back in the silence after the verdict. Back where it all began. For a moment, I wondered if it was from Slade. Somehow, even behind bars, manipulating strings. But no, this was sharper, newer, hungrier. Emily confirmed it later. The paper was ultra-premium, manufactured exclusively for high-profile clients of a New York printing firm. The handwriting, traced from a digital font, one we designed ourselves years ago for Nova's confidential reports. Whoever sent it knew everything. We traced the letter's origin to a firm called Solus Dominion. One we hadn't heard of. No public listings. No employee roster. Not even a website. Just a name embedded in back-end stock transfer records and IP trails buried under a dozen shell corporations. It was a ghost fund. But ghosts don't move billions overnight. Solus wasn't like Slade Capital. Slade wanted to win. Solus wanted to control. They weren't taking profits, they were taking assets that shaped futures. Water rights in Africa, mineral mines in Latin America, hospitals in the Midwest. Emily's face went cold as she read the data. "They're not bleeding the system," she whispered. "They're building one." And someone inside Solus knew who we were. Not just Caleb and Emily. They knew Nova, Ashenlight, Echo, the whole mythology. It wasn't an attack. It was a reflection. We called it Echo Collapse. a plan designed to mimic the same strategies we used against Slade, but built to adapt in real time to an AI-driven opponent. Emily constructed a deep learning parasite that infiltrated Solis's neural net and mirrored its trade predictions. I reached out through encrypted lines to whistleblowers, former interns, even ex-hackers once burned by Solis's hiring machine. But Solis anticipated us. Emily's systems glitched. Her secure drives wiped themselves twice. I woke up one morning to find all the photos on my phone replaced with static. Then came the voicemail, a child's voice, whispering my name, followed by 30 seconds of silence. Solis wasn't just responding. They were playing our game better than we ever had. Then Emily vanished. For days. No text. No signal. No trace. I searched everywhere, our safe houses, the servers, the old bank drop boxes. Nothing. On the 5th day, I found her at the observatory in Vermont where we used to lie beneath the stars as kids. Her eyes were bloodshot. Her laptop hummed softly beside her. They've been watching us, she said, her voice frayed. Not just recently. For years. Since Nova. Since Slade. She handed me a list. 10 names. Every one of them, a foster care kid like us. Now working in Solis. Our code had become their scripture. They weren't just following in our footsteps. They were refining them. Perfecting them. Turning our justice into justification. We hadn't just started a movement. We'd started a contagion. We had a choice. We could run, disappear, burn our trails, vanish into quiet lives. Or we could strike, knowing it might cost us everything. We chose fire. Emily unleashed Ghost Thread, a recursive neural injection designed to destabilize Solis's core algorithm by feeding it subtle errors enough to trigger cascading panic when regulators inevitably peeked under the hood. While she waged war in code, I went public, live on a global broadcast at the International Ethics in Finance Summit. I told our story. My father's death. My mother's sacrifice. What Derek Slade took. And what we did to take it back. I didn't hide our methods. I revealed them. I named Solis Dominion. The reaction was nuclear. Regulators swarmed. Stock markets jittered. Whistleblowers surfaced. One of Solis's senior architects was found dead in a hotel room in Hong Kong. Another tried to flee through the Balkans and vanished mid-transit. Within 48 hours, Solis collapsed. But the fallout was just beginning. 2 weeks later, we received an email from a 13-year-old girl named Ava in Michigan. Her father had killed himself after a hostile corporate takeover, one executed with algorithmic efficiency. Her mother, once a nurse, was now selling plasma and working warehouse shifts just to afford insulin. She had watched my speech. Her email was 5 sentences. I don't have money. I don't have power. But I know what you meant when you said we remember. I do. I remember. Teach me. We cried that night, because in her voice we heard our childhood echo. What began with a single orphan now became hundreds. We launched the Whitmore Project, a decentralized, encrypted, open-source platform designed to mentor, educate, and empower every survivor of systemic collapse. We trained coders in refugee camps, built solar-powered server farms in war zones, partnered with ethical fintech startups, hired whistleblowers no one else would touch. Emily led the coding academies. I taught regulation frameworks. We didn't build a company. We built a firewall not around markets but around people. Because corruption is a virus. It mutates. And so must the cure. There's no statue. No fanfare. Just a plaque outside the Whitmore Institute for Economic Integrity, standing quietly in downtown Manhattan, where Slade once ruled from the sky. In memory of Michael and Lisa Whitmore, and for every child who remembers. A young boy in a hoodie stops to read it. He traces the letters with his fingers. His mother, holding 2 grocery bags, waits as he finishes. Emily and I watch from across the street. No speeches, no cameras, just a breath of silence. She looks at me and says, "We didn't just bring him down." I nod. "We brought the truth back up."